Okay, so today I'm working on a 2020 Ram 1500. This has a 5.7 liter Hemi V8 and only has 38,000 miles on it. This particular truck was brought to me with a check engine light, and it had a trouble code. Here's a printout that the customer brought me, they got from the parts store. But that right there, P3449, cylinder 7 deactivation control circuit. So that is related to the MDS system, or the multi-displacement system that's on the engine. It's a way of shutting off 4 of the 8 cylinders in order to promote fuel economy under light load conditions, such as cruising on the highway. Not surprisingly, it's problematic, especially with the OEM design. So there's a total of 4 of these valves underneath the intake manifold. Each one positioned by the cylinder it's supposed to deactivate. You can see the body of it is plastic. Again, this is a way for the manufacturer to save money at the expense of reliability. The aftermarket ones, in my case, I'm using a Dorman unit. That is the part number, 916592XD. These ones, and I already have them installed in the engine, otherwise I would show you what they look like. But they have an all steel body, so instead of this being plastic, it's completely made out of steel. And also on the Dorman one, you'll notice the screen right here is much larger. It has a lot more surface area to promote oil flow. So both are very good things in what it takes for this to be more reliable. As far as so you have to remove the intake manifold, and also I want to point out too, you're going to need a new intake gasket set. There's a Felpro MS 97089, so that's a new intake gasket kit. But as far as removing the intake manifold, not really too big a deal. This is the throttle body here by the serpentine belt in the radiator. So you have to undo this electrical connector here for the throttle body. A few various vacuum hoses. There's 2 right here to undo. It's interesting too, the oil filler neck is part of the intake manifold, so this stays with it. There's 8 injectors on this engine, obviously. So you have to undo the electrical connectors on all 8 fuel injectors. There is one single fuel line that goes into the fuel rail. There's a quick connect fitting that slides over this. So you need a quick, a tool for that. Clips over, shoves up, pulls it this way towards the spring, and that dislodges the spring and allows you to pull away that quick connect fitting. Aside from that, there's a total of 10 bolts that hold it down to the cylinder head. So right here with the 8mm head, 5 on each side. Undo those bolts, pretty easy to do. And one thing that may trip you up is right here. So this is the rear of the intake manifold. This is towards the firewall of the truck. This is an electrical motor. This controls the swirl valves or runner valves in the intake manifold in order to manipulate airflow. This connector right here, it's not very obvious to you with this intake manifold in the truck. So you have to reach behind there, and it's okay to unbolt the intake manifold, move it ahead 4 inches, twist it so you can get better access to this connector. But there's a red safety tab to undo, squeeze it connector. And in my case, it took quite a bit of force trying to pull that down. I think because there's a lot of dirt and dust here that accumulated, but I was surprised at how much force it took to yank that down. Also, on the back of the engine, there is a wiring harness that runs across from cylinder head to cylinder head, and it clips over the stud right here in the rear of the intake manifold. All you need is a screwdriver or some kind of pry tool to pull it away from that. So that's not a big deal, but that's also something that the intake manifold will be hung up on as you're trying to remove it. So be sure to undo that connector, undo that clip, and the intake manifold should pull right away from the engine. No big deal. Don't forget this connector right here too. I believe that's the map sensor for the intake manifold. But that's pretty obvious. You'll be able to see that. My case actually found a, you can see those are the other 3 solenoids. I found a mouse nest under there, which I wasn't too happy about, but that's how it goes. So here we are looking down at the engine. When you remove that intake manifold, you're going to see this large foam piece. This is a way of suppressing noise from the lifter valley. I have no plans to reinstall this. You can see a mouse has chewed it up pretty good. The mouse nest was right around in here. And, you know, as soon as I saw that, I was concerned, like, well, maybe a mouse had, you know, ate through the wiring harness here somewhere. But I looked at it carefully, and the wiring harness is perfectly fine, so I'm gonna just keep it as it is. But here are the Dorman MDS solenoids I've installed. I will say, when you remove the old ones, obviously undo the electrical connector here. I had a pair of vice grips I grabbed onto the body of that solenoid and carefully wiggled it back and forth as I pulled it up. Because what you don't want to happen is for the bottom part of that solenoid to break off in the engine, because that's a whole nother headache, and you can deal with it, but just don't put yourself in that position. So take your time, take care to carefully remove these solenoids in a way that won't break them when you pull them straight up. So again, wiggle it back and forth as you're applying force upward. This is a low mileage engine. If this was a higher mileage engine, I might consider replacing this. This is the VVT solenoid, or variable valve timing solenoid. Again, this truck only has 30,000 miles on it, or 38,000, and I'm just going to leave that be. I don't feel a need to address that right now. But if you have a higher mileage truck, you know, absolutely get all 4 of these MDS solenoids, and then get that VVT solenoid as well. And then obviously new intake manifold gaskets. Also, be sure, you know, I like to use a vacuum cleaner, my shop vacuum, and vacuum out all the debris in the intake valley. Use compressed air around the old solenoids and blow out around the perimeter of it, because you don't want dirt and debris to fall into the bore. So, you know, take care, make sure you have a clean working environment here. And otherwise, like in any other engine, take great care and make sure you don't drop anything in the intake runners or into the cylinders. That's pretty much it. Well, I'll say too, on the front of the intake manifold, there's this bracket here. This bracket right here bolts to the intake manifold. You see it has an upper radiator hose, 2 AC lines below it that it clips to. So just unbolt that from the intake manifold and pull it away, pull it forward. And let's see, what else? I think that's pretty much it. That's the only things I really have to address. Oh yeah, and then also on these new solenoids, be sure to use a generous amount of oil on the O-rings for them. That'll help it, because trying to make them seat into the bore is kind of difficult or problematic. So make sure to lubricate those O-rings heavily with oil, and that'll make it really easy to push these solenoids firmly into place before you tighten down the bolts on them. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm going to put this thing back together, and I'm going to take it to the scan tool and show you the code that I had, and we'll see where I'm at. Okay, so that's what it looks like all put back together. I will say that on the very back, like I was talking about earlier, the wire loom slides over a stud on the rear of the intake manifold. That was giving me grief as I put this intake manifold in and trying to line up the intake manifold bolts. So I actually cut off that part of that piece of plastic on the wiring loom, because it's completely unnecessary. So anyway, with that out of the way, I was able to put the intake manifold back in place. It's definitely sort of a headache, because you're trying to reach over the engine bay. The intake manifold is heavier than you'd think, but anyway, all worked out well. So now I'm going to start this thing up and see how she does. Okay, and that's pretty much it. I don't really have too much to add to that. I just finished a test drive. Truck is running great. Not that it ran poorly before, honestly. The customer didn't really notice any difference in how it drove even with that cylinder 7 MDS solenoid trouble code that was on. But you know, I've double checked, make sure no trouble codes have come back, and everything's looking really good. Overall, not a bad job as long as you know what you're doing or have experience working on modern cars. Just kind of a pain in the neck trying to reach into the engine bay because this engine is set so far back and underneath the wiper cowl there, as you can see. But I can certainly think of worse jobs than doing this. Yeah, so hopefully that helps somebody out, and yeah, that's it. Thanks for watching.